Hello, everybody. I am Dr. Steve Johnson, and I want to welcome you today to this webinar. The topic will be REBT disputing and how to avoid common traps of disputing so that we do kind of a better job of that and help our clients even more. Okay, so at any time throughout this webinar, if you have any questions, please feel free to make comments, and I will get to those as I am able. Okay. So let me begin here with the PowerPoint so that you can watch this. One thing is that if you would like to get a copy of this PowerPoint, I'm more than happy to do that. All you need to do is email me at steveajohnson.phd, steveajohnson.phd at gmail.com, and I would get that to you just as soon as I'm able. Also, again, if you have a comment, a question, feel free to post it in the comments section, and I will definitely get to that as I am able. So, introduction here. For those of you who may not have been exposed much to REBT, and is that what we do in REBT is a second wave behavioral model. Is that we try to identify dysfunctional beliefs. Sometimes we call them irrational or unhelpful. And then we challenge those beliefs, the purpose being to help the client realize that they're not helpful or that they're dysfunctional. We don't stop there. Then we try to replace them with more functional beliefs. And of course, this whole process is done collaboratively with the client. We are not dictating any of this. However, as important as this process of disputing the unhelpful beliefs is, if it's not done skillfully, sometimes we can encounter some problems and disrupt the therapeutic alliance, have clients feel judged or put down, maybe gets confused whatsoever. So I'm going to explore some of the disputing and why that matters, some common mistakes that therapists often make, not just new REBT therapists, but sometimes we all slip into some bad habits. And then what can we do to improve those? So first is exactly what is disputing. And I've already said, this is a very active and structured process where we identify, challenge, and replace dysfunctional beliefs, because those beliefs tend to lead to emotional distress, unhelpful emotions, and dysfunctional behaviors that may sabotage us in reaching our desired life goals in all kinds of domains of life. Beliefs that would be dysfunctional and rigid would be, I must absolutely succeed. You can see how rigid that is. Others must treat me fairly. Life has to be the way I want it to be. And if it isn't, it's absolutely horrible. So disputing those is a very important part and is at the core of psychological suffering. Those dysfunctional beliefs can be at the core of psychological suffering. So we want to replace these. And we do this we question them, replace them so that they're not likely to persist. So what is the core of the disputing? This is where as I've said, we identify irrational beliefs. Sometimes I will refer to those as unhelpful. When I'm working with clients, I will often use the word unhelpful, but I'm using irrational because you will find that within the literature. these irrational beliefs or unhelpful beliefs are very, very rigid. They're not logical. They don't logically follow from a situation or event. They're not realistic, and they can actually be very self-defeating. As I said, they have a tendency to disrupt the attainment of desired life goals. So the process here, as I said, we're going to challenge the logic. We're going to challenge with evidence. We're going to challenge the usefulness of those beliefs. And once we've done that and the client realizes the dysfunctionality of those beliefs, then we replace them with rational beliefs. And within REBT, we would say those rational beliefs tend to be much more flexible, not so rigid. They're much more logical, realistic, and they support the attainment of our desired life goals in the different domains of life. This is a part of restructuring. Restructuring has some other components to that. I won't be getting into that in this particular webinar, but if you go on my YouTube channel, Psychotherapy, Education, and Training, I have videos on exactly how to go about doing the cognitive restructuring. And by doing that, we can begin to change our emotions and act by changing how we think, right? And if it's done well, they can lead to really profound and lasting shifts in how we view the self and others and life and the world, and actually change our behaviors. So this is core to the identity of REBT. Another one common pitfall within REBT is, despite the fact that disputing can be quite powerful, it isn't foolproof. And there are three common traps to avoid. And one of those is focusing solely on the negative, is to identify the unhelpful or irrational beliefs and overlook some of the strengths that the client has, some of the great values and areas in which they are quite resilient. So it's a pitfall if we just move into disputing the irrational beliefs without looking at the strengths and values of the client, and even the client's resilience and how they may respond to the disputation. So that can be a drawback. And I think sometimes if we jump into the dispute without connecting with the client, they can feel that they're being criticized or attacked. Now, when we orient the client or clients to REBT, we will let them know what this process is, how we operate. So they have some psychoeducation here about what we're going to do. And we let them know that we are not criticizing them. We are, because they have helped us to realize and identify some of the beliefs that are not helpful, we will join with them to kind of show the unhelpfulness of it and give a pathway to challenge and replace those with beliefs that may help them deal with the issues that brought them into therapy in the first place. So it's very important that we do begin with assessing the strengths of the client and their resilience, because we want to know what's already going well. So most clients, when they come in, they may be focusing on what's not going well, but we can, by talking to them, determine whether there are times when they have the issue that's under consideration and it goes well, and there are times when it doesn't go well, and find out what the difference, and then we can zero in on the beliefs that make the difference in terms of whether they move toward those goals or not. So it's really important that we avoid this one, focusing solely on the negative. Another one is being overly aggressive. Now, a lot of people think that Albert Ellis was extremely aggressive in disputing. I worked with him for years, and I was just blown away often. I mean, he was often blunt and to the point, but very, very supportive of the clients and wasn't overly aggressive. I mean, it's New York kind of style sometimes and to get to the point, because he wanted to help them so that they wouldn't be in therapy forever. But it is direct and but it's not an interrogation. And so people who think that it's we interrogate and we aggressively challenge those dysfunctional beliefs, that is not REBT. Challenging a belief too forcefully, or if we use sarcasm, or frustration, can shut clients down. The disputing, remember, it's not the client, the therapist disputing those beliefs, but it is a collaborative exploration between the therapist and the client, not a debate, not a takedown or a put down. Okay? The third common pitfall is lack of a tailored approach. Not all clients respond to the same kind of questioning. Some may benefit by asking Socratic questions, others by using analogies or humor. And we need to tailor our approach. Otherwise, we risk disengagement with the client or confusion. So again, part of that will go better if we set the stage at the beginning of the therapy about what we're going to do and what the process of disputing the beliefs is all about, that it's never an attack upon them, and that therefore we try to make it unique to the client that is sitting in front of us. I can't think of any time where I just dispute everybody in the same way. You have to tailor that to the client. Okay. Another one is to adopt strategies for effectively disputing. And I think there are three key ways to do that. I mean, many, many ways, but I just wanted to point out three key ways to effective disputing. One, of course, is to build a strong therapeutic alliance. Now, when I say that, sometimes I notice among my graduate students, they think, okay, we can't do any therapy. We couldn't do any cognitive restructuring until we have fully formed a therapeutic alliance. I think it's not the REBT way. Of course, REBT is about forming a sound therapeutic alliance, but often a sound therapeutic alliance begins with how we say hello, and also when we listen to the issues that brought them in and even show them how they can begin to challenge dysfunctional beliefs and replace them with more functional beliefs. And they have more hope at that point that they can overcome whatever issue that they're dealing with, right? So part of forming a sound therapeutic alliance is having this open, non-defensive, non-aggressive interaction with the client, and clarity and purposeful in the way that we challenge those unhelpful or dysfunctional beliefs, okay? And in that process, and we know this from common factors, it is important for our clients to feel respected and heard so that they can develop trust in us. Two, use active listening and empathy. Empathy is core here to any therapy. If we can't be empathic, then therapy is not happening. So it's going to take a little time, but that therapeutic alliance begins before we even do an intervention, and we don't wait till this magic moment when there's this perfect therapeutic alliance. It's an ongoing process throughout the therapy. So we have to listen to the client so we understand their beliefs and how they function in the life of the client. Now, this is really key. A lot of times individuals will hear, the therapist will hear the belief of the client, and then they want to challenge it. But that is not the REBT way. The beliefs that the client holds are always within a context. And it is extremely important for us to understand the context in which the client holds those beliefs. Okay. And when we understand the context and the function of those beliefs and what they were trying to solve, we better understand the client, and the client better feels understood by us. They're more open to us questioning those beliefs and then beginning to try to replace them. Before I go any further, just a reminder that if you do have any questions, feel free to make a comment, and I will get to those as I am able. I want to continue the disputing. And again, I think a theme that I really want to emphasize that goes along with common factors research is that we want this to be a collaborative relationship, and we take a collaborative approach, that it's gradual. We don't just start hard hitting. So we just kind of start with gentle, curious questions. So we're modeling for our client to adopt a curiosity about the way we think, the beliefs and the inferences that we hold about the self and other people, our life, the world around us. And then we explore what kinds of evidence or logic or even the functionality of those beliefs. And we do that together. For example, here's some examples that I just thought of when I was developing this. We might pose, what's the evidence that you must never fail? Where is that? Where's the evidence for that, right? And the other one is, how realistic is that? How logical is that to expect everyone to treat you fairly all the time? Okay. And how does holding that belief help or hurt you? So the first one is, where's the evidence? That would be kind of an empirical dispute, and that kind of a dispute may work for your client. Is it realistic to expect everyone to treat you fairly all the time? That's a more logical dispute. Not as many people respond to logical disputes as empirical disputes, but for many individuals, a logical dispute works really well. And so this is why it's really important when we're first teaching the concept of disputation of dysfunctional, irrational beliefs, that we try a bunch of different styles and find out which ones work best for the client. And of course, the last one, how does holding this belief help or hurt you, is really a pragmatic or a functional way to dispute that. And often I will start with that because people tend to have an intrinsic interest in whether something is helping or hurting them. And then I might go to empirical and logical until I learn what tends to work better for my client. Okay. And this process, if we don't have rigid about it, and we're doing it in conversational ways, using examples from the situation that the client is in the context of that, then they learn this, and then they become more empowered to participate very actively in their own transformation. The last thing we want to do is for the client is for the client to be rather passive. We get change not just through mere insight, but actively engaging in the challenge and replacing of some of those dysfunctional beliefs. Now, changing dysfunctional beliefs is not the only approach within REBT. It is one of them. And so please don't think that cognitive restructuring is all that we do. It is very, very important, but it's certainly not all that we do. We have all kinds of different interventions that I will be covering in subsequent kinds of webinars. This is another one that is really, really important, and it's a pitfall. It is, if you as a therapist, don't apply the disputation to real world situations for the client, then it doesn't go quite as well. That's why early, within the very first session, right? Of course, we do an intake, but often we use handouts and forms for clients in advance before they come in, so that we can have some of the intake on paper electronically so that we can spend some time jumping in to an example of the situation of the issue that they're bringing to therapy. So a real world situation of a client. And so I want to look at some of the common irrational beliefs and how disputing may be able to help. And these are just examples on some very common things that we encounter. Now, I'm a professor at a university, so I often see, and I teach graduate students, but I'm also a director for the undergraduate program. So I do teach undergraduate students, and I find many of my students tend to be very perfectionistic. They believe that they have to do everything perfectly, or failing. Well, psychotherapy is not the kind of thing that you quickly learn how to be perfect. In fact, I've never learned how to be perfect. I'm hoping that I'm good enough so that I can collaborate with clients to make some important changes in their life so that they feel better and do better in their life. And so let's say that I have someone who's a perfectionistic, because often they can be highly anxious or even get depressed because of the perfectionism, or even angry if they get a bad comment from me, or I take a good number of points off or something. Then if someone had that kind of perfectionistic belief, we might go, where's the evidence that being imperfect, making mistakes, makes you an utter failure? Is that standard helping you or hurting you? So notice that dispute combines two different types of dispute. One is empirical, where's the evidence that being imperfect makes you an utter failure? And then it also has a functional or pragmatic dispute. How is that standard helping you? Is it helping you or hurting you? Okay. Another one would be to look at should statements. Shoulds, oughts, must, have tos, needs, and that kind of thing. Now, we're not word police. We don't react to words. We react to demandingness and dysfunctional beliefs, but we don't react to the words. So if a client just says should or ought or must, we don't pounce on that. We have to determine whether they're actually being demanding in a way that is not helpful. Because sometimes we just say should or must, and we're just using the word conversationally, but not in a dysfunctional way. So we don't pounce on those. I know early in the semester, my students sometimes pounce on, oh, they said should. And I'm like, wait a minute. We need to check the context of it and how they're using those words. We're not word police. We are looking at the ideas and concepts here. But let's say that they are engaging in a should that is really a demand, and they hold a belief such as people should treat me with respect. Now, of course, we would want that. But do people absolutely have to do that? No. There's all kinds of evidence that people can be rude, mistreat you, all of that. It's not great. We don't like it, but they have, free will, and they may do that. And morally, should they? Yeah. But do they absolutely have to do it? No. There's a difference between morally what would be good and then what actually happens in reality. So morally, yeah. But in reality, they may not. There's no necessity in reality that they do it, especially if they don't embrace that moral value. So disputing it would be to recognize that it would be nice. Like, yeah, it's nice to get respected, but is it really realistic to expect everyone to act that way, behave that way? What happens when they don't? Because sometimes they will combine that with, that's terrible, it's horrible, it's awful. And then life isn't necessarily terrible, horrible, and awful. There's still good things in the world, etc. It may get in the way of performance and enjoyment and those kinds of things. And sometimes it can be on a serious matter. And so looking at what the consequence of it may be a disputation of awfulizing about it. Okay. So this is really important, though. Remember that shoulds can be all different types. There are legal shoulds, like I should drive 25 miles or under in a 25-mile-an-hour zone. Yeah, that's a legal should. REBT isn't worried about legal shoulds. It could be a moral should, I shouldn't kill people. I shouldn't harm them deliberately. Yeah, that's a moral should. And yeah, that's a good one, right? But if I hold something in a, if it's a non-moral should or a non-legal should, then that can be problematical. We often call those metaphysical shoulds about that reality has to be the way I want it to be. Absolutely has to be. Well, we don't have that kind of control over the world or sometimes not even ourselves and certainly not over other people. So that kind of should will not help us. Another real world situation is catastrophizing or awfulizing, which we often see when we're angry or anxious or depressed. Um, for example, a belief that would be an example of catastrophizing or awfulizing would be if I lose this job, it'll end me. My life is over at this point. Now, that's a gross exaggeration. I know the feeling, right? I understand that. But if they really embrace that belief, it's not going to be really helpful. So, helping them learn how to dispute that and embrace something more functional would be really helpful. Is it truly the end, or would it just be very difficult? What other options would you have? You see what I mean? We set the stage with the dispute, and then we open it up to something more practical, other options. But when we are demanding, and the demand is absolute and rigid, we often can't see options that may be right in front of us. So it's really helpful in those situations. So um, in treating anxiety and depression, we REBT disputing helps them identify these exaggerated or rigid thinking and replace them with what in REBT. And if you read the works of Wendy Dryden, you can read them in great detail and in an excellent way that we want to adopt beliefs that are flexible. They're based in reality, not a denial of reality. I once heard uh, Dr. Ellis say that the goal of psychotherapy is to help clients accept reality as it is, not necessarily like every aspect of it, but accept that that's the way it is right now without unduly disturbing ourselves. That doesn't mean we're going to not be disturbed at all sometimes, but not unduly disturbing ourselves in a sense that it gets in the way, it causes dysfunctional emotions and gets in the way of us attaining our desired life goals. So that's what we try to help them do in REBT. And we know from research that how targeting disputing can reduce all kinds of emotions, panic, it can lift a mood, it can empower long-term change, right? So real world situations are really important. And if we ignore those real world situations that the clients are going through and just talk in abstract ways or philosophical ways about REBT and try to just explain the theory, but without the application to their case, it doesn't go so well. I mean, we lose the power of REBT. How can we maximize the effectiveness of REBT? Because that's what we all want to do. It's what I know I want to do. I've done REBT for decades, as well as other models. And I just am trying to improve all the time. I'm learning new ways to explain things as I talk to colleagues and deal with different clients in different contexts. I'm always trying to maximize the effectiveness of my REBT. Not always successful with it, but I hope that's a trend. One way that we do this is by behavioral activation, not just go after the cognitions, but put these beliefs into practice. If you read the handbook on REBT that was done by Wendy Dryden, Raymond DiGiuseppe, and Christine Doyle and Valter, then you will see that in that book, it is said that when we give homework, that it's almost always a good idea for it to be behavioral in nature. We want to put our new beliefs into practice. If they can dispute their fear of failure, then we may, right? Then we may say, okay, let's take a small calculated risk in your life this week, okay, in a particular situation, and discuss that with the client about what would be a small step to take a risk um, of failing, okay, in the hope that they'll overcome the awfulizing about the possibility of failure or the demandingness of perfection. Another one is emotional regulation interventions. Um, Often clients, and all of you, sometimes when you're anxious or fearful, you get physiologically aroused. When the brain perceives the threat, then we see the activation of the HPA axis, cortisol is produced, and then we have all of those consequences in sympathetic activation. Heart rate increases, we breathe faster, we may even get dizzy, lightheaded. So one of the things that we can do is help that decrease some of that physiological arousal and emotional response that are triggered by those irrational beliefs that they may have. And there are many ways to do this. Deep breathing, mindfulness techniques, we've also integrated into REBT. Imagery can be used, so they imagine a situation and then shift the way they're thinking about that situation, so they do better job of emotional regulation, right? And then what they learn is something tremendously important. When we're highly aroused, we perceive threat in the environment. Sometimes we perceive overwhelming threat. And when we perceive overwhelming threat, we often are unable to see the resources that we have. Some of those resources are in the environment itself, other people, other support systems there. Other resources are internal, our own motivation, our own abilities to be optimistic, those kinds of things. And so helping them regulate their emotions rather than staying highly physiologically aroused will help them move from seeing the perception of threat as overwhelming to maybe a manageable threat that includes the presence of some resources within the environment, and the client can better use those resources. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so we include all of that within REBT too. Some other ways to maximize the effectiveness is what we try to do is help build self-efficacy. What? It's not us doing the disputation all the time. We're teaching them how to dispute their own dysfunctional beliefs. We want them to internalize that process of identifying the unhelpful belief. Become curious about their emotional response in a situation, identify the dysfunctional belief that may have contributed to that emotion or behavior, challenge it, and then replace it in the hope that and then put that new belief into practice so that we're moving them into habituating a more functional, adaptive belief and behavioral repertoire, okay? And that will give them self-efficacy when they can take on that entire process. And then, of course, provide ongoing support and practice. I mean, it is really important that clients realize and we realize that disputing a belief is not a one and done. Wendy Dryden often says that thinking that disputing is a one and done is like thinking that I have to eat once and for all. Well, that's not the way eating is. It's not the way human nutrition goes. It's an ongoing process, and so can dispute. As we learn it, we may need to do it less, but there are always going to be challenging situations in a client's life and in our lives that may necessitate or give us the opportunity to dispute that. So it's a skill that we want to help practice with the client, and that's why we would give homework assignments, regularly review progress, how they think it's going, celebrate, the client's progress, and build some time into the therapy that we do that. That's also part of that, focusing on positive rather than just on negative and dysfunctional beliefs, that they're moving toward more rational thinking. Okay. I want to conclude there. I was wanting to keep this short because I know it's Sunday, at least in my part of the world. And so I do want to conclude this and talk about something quite briefly. Yes, disputing is part of the heart of REBT. It does take some finesse. It does take some skill building on the part of the therapist, and that'll come along as we practice it and practice it. By the way, in a few weeks, I will be announcing the formation of some REBT practice groups where individuals who are learning REBT and want to practice with other individuals who are learning or farther down the road, an international group that we will learn how to do that together. It'll be small groups, and so that everyone has a chance to learn that and practice skill building within REBT. We want to, I hope this was helpful to identify and see how we could avoid common traps like focusing on the negative and grilling the client, interrogating them, or using a one size fits all kind of approach, which is not REBT. We want to build a trusting relationship, listen very, very closely and empathetically, and enjoying this collaborative journey with our clients so that they develop more helpful beliefs, so they experience greater freedom and joy in their life. And when that's done, it's more than just cognitive work. It's really an important pathway that we have helped clients form, and a pathway to freedom and meaningful change in their life. One of the next steps is if you found this particular video helpful in some way, then if you like, subscribe, and that kind of thing, then I will be forming more content on REBT, CBT, and even third way behavioral models like dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT, and acceptance and commitment therapy. I also will be looking at stages of change model, motivational interviewing, and narrative exposure therapy, which is really, really important in the treatment of PTSD and trauma-related disorders. If you want to get even deeper into this, if you want to participate in special training workshops and webinars, you might consider joining the Psychotherapy Education and Training YouTube channel that I've formed and get special members-only kind of training and workshop. This is my way to give very, very affordable ways to get this more individualized attention for individuals. Okay, so you're welcome to do that. Also, I do want you to. I want to thank you for taking some time out of your day to listen to this information. It shows your dedication to wanting to improve as a therapist, as we all want to do. And I hope you will. I really do hope that you will consider joining the group that I will be announcing on YouTube, and that is small groups of those of us who are dedicated to improving our REBT. Whether you're you're a beginner, you're more at the advanced stage, or whatever, we can all join together and help each other. Thank you so much, and I just want to wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing you again. If you have recommendations for topics, always feel free to let me know through YouTube or even in the comment sections here. Goodbye and have a great day.